Hello, I'm Sue Andersen, grief guide and yoga teacher, dedicated to helping individuals navigate the challenging journey of loss. Welcome to Growth from Grief, where I aim to offer strategies to transition from the depths of grief to the path of healing. Whatever loss you are grappling with, here you'll discover support to ease both the physical and emotional burdens of grief. Together, let's embark on a journey towards strength, peace, and healing. I'm so glad you are here. Welcome back to Growth from Grief. My name is Sue Andersen, and I'm glad you're here today. So our topic today is going to be around grief and guilt feelings, and how do we let go of that? And I want to just start by saying this is a really tough one for me. It took me years to let go of guilt I was feeling after my son died. And, even now when I have some low days, I still come back to those. Oh, I should have done this, I should have done that. But I can get out of that. It's not running around my head. I can really get out of it and just, take a breath, give myself some grace and let it pass, let that feeling pass. But that takes a long time, right? I mean, that takes whatever time it takes. And I would say that it's different for every loss, for every death, especially a person who died, right? That's going to be the thing where we might feel the most guilt when it's a person. And I want to just read to you a passage from Brene Brown's book, Atlas of the Heart. I really love her insights when she talks about emotions, her discussion about emotions. So here she's talking about guilt, and here's how she defines guilt. An emotion that we experience when we fall short of our own expectations or standards. However, with guilt, our focus is on having done something wrong and on doing something to set things right, like apologizing or changing behavior. So in circumstances where we're not talking about grief, that might be feeling guilty because of words that you had with somebody. You lashed out in anger, and now you feel guilty about that because really that was not appropriate behavior towards that person, that you were feeling that anger about something in yourself. And so you would release that guilt by apologizing to that person. But in the case of grief, we can't change anything because this person that we loved is gone, right? So we may have really wronged them, or we might think that we wronged them, or we should have done something, or we could have done something in terms of our behavior, or again, what we think we should have done. And there are many ways that you may feel guilt after the death of a loved one, but here are three. So I've got some notes here. Here are three. You survived and the other person didn't. So you have that guilt. Maybe there was a car accident and you suffered something, but that other person that was with you, maybe that person died. So there's that sort of guilt, right? Maybe you have been witnessing suffering, someone's suffering. Maybe you were in a relationship with a person who abused alcohol or drugs and they have passed away. And so you feel relief because that person is no longer suffering, but then you feel guilty that you're feeling relief. So that's another one. Then you have the if onlys. If only I did this, if only we talked about this other treatments that she could have gone through. If only we did this, or if only I mentioned that. That kind of goes with the should have, could have, would haves. So maybe you didn't do something, or you did something, or you wish you did something. So you want to change the outcome, right? All of these are feelings of, you're wishing that you could change the outcome, which of course we can't. And the other thing is that, when I was going through the grieving and mourning of my son and expressing some of these guilty feelings to very trusted friends who were really just, were fortunately for me, good listeners, and kind of reminded me, well, you did this. So you're saying that you didn't do anything, but you did this. And that just remembrance, right? So here I was focused on all the things that I didn't do or should have done or could have done, and this person kind of just reminded me, no, no, no. You did things. You did action. You took action. And that was extremely helpful for me. So, feelings of guilt really can be stronger with an unexpected death because there's a lot left unfinished, right? Just what I was talking about. I should have done this. I could have done that because it was not expected. And I want to give you two examples of this from my own life, from my own experience. When I was in my early 30s, I mentioned to my dad that I would look for tickets to the Metropolitan Opera. He really loved listening to opera. He had lots of opera records, and on Sundays, he would sit and he would read the paper and relax and listen to opera. And so I had this idea, oh, I'll get tickets and we'll go to the Met. Now, just to remind you, this was the 1990s, so 1990 or 91. And so I could look up a few things online, but not really, right? It wasn't the robustness that we have today. And so I did go to look for tickets online for the Metropolitan Opera. And, what I saw, it looked like everything was full. So I just said, and I kind of got lazy about it. I thought, oh, I don't, I have to call them, and how are we going to get there? We're going to take the train. We're certainly not going to drive. It just, I don't know. I kind of started to rethink, like maybe I don't really want to do this, even though I know it would be great for my dad. Or maybe I'll just put it off. So I kind of put it off, and I just said, hey, it looks like all of the weekends in November and December are booked. So I'll look again. Well, I never had the chance because my father died of a heart attack 3 months later. So, I felt so sad about that, a little bit guilty because I wanted, to give that to him. So I felt guilty that I didn't do that, but sad for me because, that would have been an experience for us together. And so, that was an example, or that is an example of, feeling guilty or remorseful for something that I didn't do. But what I resolved to do after that was to follow through. So if I was going to plan something, follow through on it. Just if it's important to the other person to just make sure that I would follow through. And that's what I've tried to do, you know. The other example has to do with Ian's death. And that, when I look back in my journal entries, so many woulda, shoulda, couldas, right? I should have done this. I should have done this when you were younger. I should have done this as, as you became an adult. I felt incredibly, guilty about the, not the way that I handled his mental health issues so much as I feel like I should have done something earlier in his life, which in fact I did. I took him to counseling. Um, I did try to do that, but I had to continually remind myself. And these really close friends of mine also reminded me that I was going through grief of the loss of Ian's father at the same time that he was also going through this grief, right? And I just didn't recognize it, or, I wasn't in that frame of mind to really focus on, maybe to the fullest, I guess, to focus on it. But I had just, I don't know, almost an obsession with this, right? Just kind of going around and around in my head with what I could have done, or the day that he died. Why didn't I call him as I was thinking about it? Now, we lived about an hour and 15 minutes away from each other. And I just happened to not be working this particular day. And I thought, oh, let me just go give him a call and let's, go to lunch. And then I was sort of like, oh, maybe he doesn't want to do that. I talked myself out of it, basically. And, that was the last time, that earlier in that day was the last time that I had spoken to him. So I just had so much that I had to release and let go of. And maybe this is something that you also feel, right? You also have these guilty feelings. Perhaps you have a person in your life who died suddenly and you didn't get to say that goodbye. Maybe you were in another part of the country or the world. And so you felt guilty that you weren't, or feel guilty because you weren't with them. Maybe there was unresolved anger. Maybe you had a little spat or a little fight. And maybe you're thinking, oh gosh, if we didn't have that fight, he wouldn't have gotten in been angry when he was driving, and maybe, such and such a thing wouldn't have happened. And of course, we don't know that, right? We tend to associate, and that guilt. Maybe we feel like we're part of the blame of something that happened, but that really isn't the case. And over time, you do come to know that um, you have to allow yourself to work this out, just like every other emotion that we feel during this grief journey. And so, let's think about it for a moment. We have all of these emotions. You might remember that grief blob that I've talked about, where we have some intense emotions right at the beginning. And then we have these other emotions that ebb and flow, and guilt can be one of those. So, during the first few years after someone's death, we may feel guilt as one of those things that's ebbing and flowing, right? It might come up with other emotions, deep sadness, and then again, that guilt might come up. I want to just read to you something from Dr. Alan Wolfelt. So he has a book that's called Companioning the Bereaved. And he notes that this is normal, this grief, I'm sorry, this guilt as part of the grieving process is normal. And assessing one's culpability, it seems to occur following death. So this is not something out of the ordinary if you feel this guilt or remorse. But he also just notes that we need to be mindful that obsessing about this could lead to more complicated grief, and that we might want to get some kind of specialized help. So I felt the need that first couple of years after Ian died to talk with a therapist. It was very, very helpful to me because these kinds of guilt feelings were something that I needed to get out, and I need somebody that wasn't going to try to fix me. I didn't need somebody to tell me something. I needed somebody to just listen and let me process and maybe ask a question. So, for example, if I was, thinking a lot about what I didn't do when, Ian was younger, this individual would remind me of something that I might have told her earlier about, that I had taken him to counseling when he was very young. And that reminder that yes, you did something would be so helpful to me, right? I could feel like, okay, I actually did something. It's just, maybe I could have done more. Maybe I could have continued that, but I have to realize that, yes, I did something. So, what are other ways, talking to somebody who isn't trying to change you? They may ask you a question, they might remind you of something, but they are listening. So find that person, find that listener, right? That's so important because we're grieving. We need to talk. We need to process. And one of the ways to process is through talking, through voice. Another way to process guilt as well as other emotions is journaling. And for me, I'm a person who journals when they're feeling very intense emotions. So throughout the first year, maybe first couple of years, I did a lot of journaling, not every day, but when I felt the need to release something, I journaled about it. And I've recently been going back through these journals, and which is very difficult, I have to tell you. The intensity of the writing, I can only read like a page and then I have to close the book. It's so intense. But I did write about my feelings of I wish I did more. I wish I did this. I wish I did that, specifically things I wish I did. But as I came to the end of a passage, for example, I in this reading, I noticed that I also had kind of I did that processing, and then I switched out of that mode and just said, well, I miss you. I hope that you are, you know, at peace. Some words to my son. So I was kind of I allowed myself to get that out, and then I, at least for that moment or that session, didn't find that obsession. Another way to release or let go of or rid yourself of that guilt is through breath work. Remember, early on in our grief journey, we can get these things in our head and they just it takes so long to get out. It's just so difficult to release. And coming to a breathing exercise is so helpful. Um, you might be looking for some resources for this. And I have, first and foremost, I have a grief guide that you can get, sueandersonyoga.com/guide. And in that grief guide, I do have some resources around breathing, especially a video. So audio and video, really good just to have sort of on your phone, right? Just have it on your phone, put it on, know that you can just breathe, do this breathing exercise, whether you're, again, watching a video or you're just listening to the audio, but it can get you out of your head, calm this feelings, and then maybe you're able to let go of that guilt. And that's a way to process it. Another way to process these strong emotions, like guilt, like anger, like shame, is through strong movements. And I've talked about this before, taking some kind of powerful poses, powerful actions that really allow you to release emotions. The sort of like jabbing, boxing motions, pounding on a pillow, those are great for releasing this energy, right? It's all energy. We don't want it to be stuck in our bodies because we only have two places for this energy: inside or letting it out. We don't want it inside. It's just going to cause so much more damage, so much more pain. You could also try an exercise. So Carla Hebert has a book that's called Yoga for Grief, and she presents different types of yoga, Raja yoga, Hatha yoga, and lineages of yoga, and the different practices in these lineages that help release grief. And so she gives a meditation which allows you to think about that guilt outside of your body. So taking that guilt and just letting it be outside of your body, releasing it from inside for a while. And that's something to think about. That image, creating an image of in your mind of what this feeling might look like, gets it out of the body and maybe allows you some release and some relief. So all of these books that I mentioned, I will certainly link to information about them and the authors in the show notes. But I want you to think about when you start feeling guilty, allow yourself to have that feeling, let it out, and then find the way to release it. Now, I mentioned early in this episode that it took me many, many years because there was a lot of layers of guilt, a lot of layers of guilt, and layers of guilt, not just from the death of my son, but from other experiences I had in losing people, people in my life, and the things that I did or didn't do. So, you know, th these emotions would come up, and when in this intense grief, in these early days of grieving my son, some of these other things would pop back up. And that was just unresolved from that other loss. And I had to allow myself to feel it. And as you know, this is not easy. It is damn hard. It is hard. And sometimes you have to do it in snippets, right? Just little tiny bits that you allow and you let go of. So I invite you to find what works best for you. Maybe it's a combination of things. But if you do feel like you are obsessing, you feel like it's just, you can't let go of this guilt, then seek out somebody that can help you through talking, a therapist, a trusted confidant, somebody who's going to listen. Again, maybe ask a question, but really they're going to listen and allow you to release. So that's it for this episode of Growth from Grief. I'll see you next time. Thanks for listening or watching.